I've never told anyone this before. Not a friend, not my husband, not even myself in full honesty. But I need to confess it, to say it aloud, because the memory won't leave me. My name is Clara, and I almost did something I swore I never would. It started when Jalen arrived. He's my husband's coworker, young, sharp, easy to talk to, and for a week he stayed in our guest room while his apartment was being renovated. At first I told myself it was just hospitality, just being polite. But from the moment I saw him unpack, I felt a shift inside me. Subtle at first, then undeniable. I realized how starved I'd been, not for sex, not even really for attention, but for connection. Someone noticing me fully, laughing at the right things, making me feel alive in ways I hadn't for years. My husband, Mark, loves me. I know that, but our lives have drifted into routine, silence, and polite distance. Jalen's presence lit a spark I wasn't prepared for. Every glance, every casual touch, every shared laugh became a quiet storm inside me. I wanted to reach out, to feel closer, to cross a line I knew I shouldn't, but I didn't. And yet, the tension, the longing, the near misses, they left marks I can't erase. This is the story of what almost happened, told honestly, from the moment it started until the moment I had to choose restraint over desire. The day Jalen arrived, I tried to act normal, to play the gracious host I thought I still was. I met him at the door, smiling, holding the small welcome basket I'd hastily thrown together. He was taller than I expected, lean, with a kind of ease in the way he moved that immediately made the room feel different. I reminded myself, he's just staying for a week. That's all. He stepped inside, shaking my hand firmly, his eyes meeting mine with a warmth that made me swallow. I felt it immediately. A pull, subtle but insistent, a quiet awareness of my own heartbeat that I hadn't noticed in months. My husband, Mark, was running late, stuck at a client meeting, so it was just us. I showed him to the guest room, explaining the layout, the towels, the bathroom. Every step, every small movement suddenly felt loaded, as if the air between us had changed. I caught myself noticing things I shouldn't have. The way his shirt clung slightly to his shoulders, the soft tone in his voice when he asked questions, the gentle attentiveness with which he listened. My mind, stubborn and uninvited, began to wander, conjuring small scenarios that I immediately chastised myself for. Clara, he's your husband's coworker. Nothing more. But even as I scolded myself, there was this undeniable tension, a quiet hum beneath ordinary interactions. When I handed him a towel, our fingers brushed just slightly longer than necessary. I felt the warmth linger on my skin, a shock of awareness I hadn't felt in years. I turned my gaze quickly, trying to erase the sensation, but the thought remained, fluttering like a bird trapped in my chest. He laughed at something trivial, a joke about the street we lived on, and the sound of it caught in me in a way I wasn't prepared for. I noticed how effortlessly he moved through the space, how easy it was to talk to him, how natural it felt to be near someone who looked at me like I was interesting, like I mattered. And in the back of my mind, a dangerous thought whispered, maybe you've forgotten what it feels like to be seen. Every small interaction, the kitchen, the hallway, the way he rested his hand on the counter for just a second too long, was a quiet test of my resolve. I kept reminding myself it was all temporary, that my husband would be home soon, that this wasn't me, that desire didn't need action to exist, and yet by the end of the day, I realized that the tension wasn't fading. It was just beginning. The days that followed were a delicate, almost unbearable balancing act. Jalen's presence filled the house in a way I hadn't realized was missing, and every small encounter felt charged with something I couldn't name, or rather, something I knew I shouldn't name. It was in the quiet, ordinary moments that the tension hit hardest. Passing him in the kitchen while he made coffee, I felt my hand brush his just slightly, an accidental touch that sent a tremor through me. I told myself it was nothing, that I was imagining it, that my skin was too sensitive because of loneliness. But my pulse betrayed me. Even sitting in the living room, pretending to read while he worked at the table nearby, I became aware of the way his presence pressed into my awareness. The scent of his cologne, faint but distinct, made my stomach tighten. His laughter, low and effortless, reached me across the room and settled in my chest in a way that was entirely inappropriate. And yet, I didn't move away. I couldn't. There was a magnetic pull I hadn't felt in years, something that made me aware of how much I craved acknowledgement, attention, intimacy, not necessarily physical, but undeniably intimate. I caught myself noticing the smallest things, the curve of his smile, the way he leaned slightly forward when he spoke, how his eyes lingered on me just a moment too long before flicking away. My mind started to create stories in the spaces between glances. Every smile, every casual touch, every unguarded laugh became a test of my self-control. I began questioning myself constantly. Am I imagining this? Is it just loneliness, or is it something more? And then there were the moments when he didn't notice me noticing him. The way he'd bend down to tie his shoes in the hallway, the casual way he shifted through the guest room, small, ordinary movements that somehow seemed intimate because of proximity. I felt my breath catch more than once, heart hammering in ways that startled me. I would retreat to the kitchen or the laundry room, telling myself I needed air, needed distance, but when I returned, the tension was always waiting, coiled and patient, like it had been lying in wait all along. The most insidious moments were when we talked. Not about anything serious, just small talk, mundane updates. But the way he listened, really listened, made me ache in a way I didn't expect. I felt safe confessing small frustrations, laughing at jokes I wouldn't normally share, feeling an emotional closeness that my marriage, through no malice of Mark's, had slowly eroded. And yet, no words were ever spoken about desire. No overt action was taken, and that made everything worse. The silence between us was louder than any conversation could have been. I knew how quickly it could collapse, how easy it would be to step past a line that should never be crossed. I wanted him, yes, but not just in the physical sense. I wanted to be seen, wanted to feel chosen, wanted to feel that quiet electricity that made me feel alive again. And every time I reminded myself to stop, to step back, I realized how fragile my restraint really was. By the end of the week, I understood something clearly. Proximity alone could ignite storms. Desire didn't need touch to feel real, and the most dangerous moments were the ones no one else could see. It happened one evening while Mark was working late. Jalen and I found ourselves in the kitchen together, the house quiet except for the hum of the refrigerator and the distant traffic outside. I was tired, emotionally frayed, and in that quiet space, the walls I'd built around my feelings began to crumble. We started talking about small things at first, work, his commute, the annoyances of city life. But somehow it shifted. I caught myself saying things I hadn't said in years, confessing frustrations I'd buried under politeness and routine. I spoke about Mark, not in anger, never in blame, but in that way you speak when you've been lonely for too long. I admitted the small, aching voids that had grown inside me, the quiet dinners, the evenings spent alone in our living room, the absence of attention that felt like indifference. Jalen listened, really listened. He didn't interrupt, didn't judge, didn't make a move that would have crossed a line. And yet, the intimacy of being heard, of being understood so effortlessly, was intoxicating. My chest felt tight, my fingers a little restless. I realized that I hadn't been this open with anyone for a long time. Not Mark, not a friend, not myself. I wanted to reach out, to bridge the gap in a way that I knew I shouldn't. I felt the ache of it, a longing for connection that had nothing to do with sex, but everything to do with desire in its most elemental form. Every word, Every nod, every empathetic glance from him stoked a fire I wasn't allowed to tend. Guilt pressed down immediately after each thought, each flicker of temptation. I knew that what I felt was dangerous, that the emotional closeness alone could feel like betrayal if I let it go too far. And yet, I didn't stop myself from thinking about it, from noticing the way my body responded, heart racing, breath shallow, a warmth in my chest that was equal parts fear and longing. There was a moment when our hands nearly touched as we reached for the same glass in the cupboard. My mind exploded in a rush of desire, panic, and self-awareness all at once. I pulled back, pretending to reach somewhere else, my heart hammering. And in that instant, I realized that the emotional vulnerability I'd allowed myself with him was just as dangerous as any physical crossing. By the end of that night, I was left trembling in ways I hadn't expected. The tension, the longing, the emotional honesty, it had opened something inside me, raw and exposed. And I understood, with a clarity that was frightening, that desire didn't need action to feel real. What we shared in silence, in fleeting glances and unspoken understanding, was enough to leave marks on me that no one else could see. It was late, later than usual, and the house had slipped into that uneasy quiet that makes every sound feel amplified. I was in the living room, straightening a stack of magazines, when I noticed Jalen lingering near the doorway. He wasn't supposed to be there. Mark had mentioned he'd be in his room. But he smiled at me, that easy, open smile, and I felt my chest tighten. We started talking, casual at first, about nothing in particular, but the air between us had changed. It wasn't just curiosity anymore. It was something heavier, a magnetic pull that made every breath feel like it could tip us over the edge. He leaned just slightly closer, and I could feel the heat of his presence pressing into mine. I told myself it was nothing, that I was imagining it, but my body refused to lie. Then it happened. Our hands brushed, not on purpose, not accidental in the sense of clumsiness, but lingering, hesitant, almost testing the line. My mind raced. Panic hit first, sharp and sudden. Clara, stop. This is your husband's coworker. This is not okay. Step back. But the pull, the need to stay near, to feel that connection, even for a second, was nearly irresistible. Our eyes met, and there was a long, unspoken exchange in that gaze. He didn't move closer. He didn't speak. But everything, the tilt of his head, the half smile, the way his fingers twitched near mine, screamed possibility. Desire, restraint, and guilt collided in me all at once. My pulse raced, my hands shook, my chest tightened. I could feel the precarious edge we teetered on, a line I knew I could cross with a single choice. I thought about Mark, about trust, about years of marriage, about the life we'd built. And yet, I also thought about what I hadn't felt in years. That urgent awareness of being truly seen, of being wanted in ways that weren't purely transactional or routine. It was intoxicating, frightening, and thrilling all at once. Finally, I stepped back, deliberately, consciously. I forced myself to focus on something else, the hum of the refrigerator, the distant traffic, the pattern of the carpet beneath my feet. I reminded myself that nothing had happened, that restraint was still mine to claim. And yet, I was left shaken, raw, acutely aware of every nerve ending, every heartbeat, every forbidden thought. Even after he left the room, the tension didn't leave me. It lingered, a quiet storm in my chest, a reminder that the edge had been closer than I realized. That night, I understood fully that temptation didn't need action to leave scars. It existed in proximity, in glances, in the silent acknowledgement of what could have been, and almost was. The week ended faster than I expected. Jalen packed his things quietly, polite and cheerful, completely unaware, or maybe only partially aware, of the storm he'd left behind in me. I helped him carry the last of his bags to the door, smiling and joking about trivial things, but inside, I was a mess of relief, guilt, and longing. The house suddenly felt emptier, quieter, as if his presence had been filling not just the guest room, but the air itself. After he left, I found myself replaying everything in my mind. The small touches, the lingering glances, the moments when our proximity had felt electric, and the near collapses that had almost undone me. I realized how intense my own need had been, how deep my loneliness ran, and how vividly I had allowed myself to feel something I hadn't felt in years. Every memory was sharp, emotionally charged, and yet utterly unacted upon. Mark came home that evening, cheerful and unsuspecting, asking about the week, and I answered politely, smoothly, hiding the turmoil beneath a practiced smile. He didn't notice anything, of course. How could he? My restraint had been perfect, but perfect in this case was exhausting, leaving me drained and jittery at the same time. I realized that the temptation hadn't needed to be acted on to leave its mark. The memory alone had etched a permanent impression on my mind and body. I also realized something else. I now understood my own boundaries in a way I hadn't before. The experience had been dangerous, intoxicating, and frightening. But it had also taught me that desire can exist without action, that emotional connection can feel as potent as any physical encounter. I felt vulnerable, yes, but also alive in a way that I hadn't in years. The lesson, painful and vivid, was that temptation doesn't need to manifest to change you. And yet, even now, weeks later, I catch myself thinking about Jalen. A smile in my memory, the tilt of his head, the quiet attentiveness that made me feel seen. It haunts me, in a way that is bittersweet, a reminder of what I almost touched and what I wisely, desperately didn't. I am left with the marks of emotional intimacy, lingering like a phantom pulse, a quiet testament to both restraint and desire. I survived it. But surviving doesn't erase it. The temptation, the longing, the near collapse, they remain. And I know that in the quiet corners of my mind, in moments of stillness, that week will always echo. Looking back, I realized that what almost happened with Jalen didn't need to happen to leave its mark. Desire, intimacy, and the tension of proximity were enough to make me question myself, to reveal the loneliness I'd buried, and to awaken parts of me I hadn't felt in years. I exercised restraint, yes, but the memory lingers, quiet and insistent, like a pulse I can't ignore. And then, just yesterday, I found a message in my inbox from an unfamiliar number. A short, casual text. Thinking about last week. My stomach dropped. I don't know if it's him or if it's someone else, but the line between what was nearly mine and what could still be isn't as secure as I thought. Have you ever been this close to crossing a line you swore you wouldn't? Share your story in the comments. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.